Hello, everyone. My name is Todd LaBeouf. We have another episode of the Shadow Self, a Journey Within podcast. My co-host Joanne and I are excited about being back again this evening. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Todd. Very excited about our guest tonight.
Very cool. I am too. So our next guest is Kelly Covert. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
I'm so good, you guys. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Well, thank you for being with us. We're very honored. So can you give the listeners a bit about your background and what you do?
So, I am an inner voice coach, and what I do is I sit with people, primarily women, but not just women, but mostly women, and I help them connect to their inner voice and to understand that they have everything that they need inside of them now, everything that they need to know that they are worthy, to know that they are loved, to know what their vision and purpose in life should be, and to know what those next steps are. And so I love just sitting with people and bringing that out and creating a space where they feel safe enough to connect with their own inner voice and trust it. And in addition to my coaching, I also have a podcast called In Her Voice, where I interview women about how they connect with their inner voice, about how they become visionaries in their life. And through changing their own world, they change our world.
Wow, that sounds really very interesting, very empowering. I love, listening to what you were saying there, Kelly.
Thank you. I love it. I love it so much. It's my purpose.
Very cool.
And that brings me to how I met Kelly. And I sat with Kelly for about 60 or 90 minutes because I was in a group where I was gung ho on writing a book. And Kelly kept looking at me about the book and saying no. And I said, "What do you mean, no?" And she said, "It's bigger than that." And then I had the privilege of sitting privately with Kelly, and she would ask me questions like, have you sat quietly with yourself about this? Have you gone into your inner voice? Have you listened? And I said, "Well, how will I know? How long will it take?" And she very simply, very gently said, take 3 days, could take 3 weeks, could take 9 months, like the birth of a baby. And she gave me homework to do. And I was going on vacation for my 51st birthday. And I did the homework and I took it very seriously. And I listened. And in that, developed this podcast and meeting Todd. And my life changed dramatically because in that, I found shadows of myself, of giving away my light, giving away the power, giving away what was my inner voice. So I had to take the time to listen. So I am so honored to have Kelly here to share her story and what was her aha moment to get her to do what she does, to speak to people, to get us to listen to ourselves.
Oh my goodness, Joanne. I wish you could see my face right now. I'm beaming. Like, this just makes me so happy to hear you say that. And you know what I love about it is that you acknowledge that, yes, we sat together, but you were the one who did that work. And that's what I encourage all of my clients to do, to really understand that our time together is a time of reflection and it's a time of intuitive ideas. I mean, we get those a lot, I think, together, but it's also a time to understand what you have to do.
And could you explain to the listeners how you yourself became a coach? I'm sure you had to go through yourself a change yourself to get there, correct?
Oh, for sure. And I feel like I'm still evolving. I mean, it's a journey, right? I don't think that there will ever be a day where the work is complete, you know?
Correct. I feel the same.
And I really embrace that and I'm very transparent about that. But for me, my life for many years was all about perfectionism and achievement and getting the pat on the back so I felt good enough. And over and over and over again, I would go through this cycle of doing the thing, getting the degree, the certificate, the good grade, the you did a great job, whatever it was. And I would feel good enough for like a minute. And then it would be like, okay, well, now what's the next thing? What's the next thing that I have to do to feel good enough? And I was addicted to that external validation. And, the interesting thing about that is in our society, being an overachiever, being a perfectionist is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you get rewarded for that. And people encourage you to keep doing it. They're like, yeah, Kelly, look, she's got it all together. She's a hard worker. She's smart. She's got all of the things. But what we don't acknowledge is until we feel worthy right now as we are, we're never going to be there. Like we're never going to be in the place where we think we want to be. And because we don't get to worthy by checking off all of the boxes. And this really came to a boiling point for me when I had kids, because up to the point when I became a mother, up to that point, it had all been like, it worked, right? Like it worked that I was a hard worker. It worked that I was an overachiever. And I kept getting that validation. And so sort of like I didn't realize there was a different way. And then when I became a mother, all of my old ways of doing things didn't work anymore. And so I immediately felt like, well, I'm failing. Like, here's this thing that, a woman, quote unquote, should be able to do. And I'm terrible at it. And none of the things that usually work for me, reading books and asking and just working really hard, none of those things worked. And what I realized was that I was trying to do mothering the way I thought I should, the way my mom did it or the way this other person did it, instead of trusting my own intuition, my own inner voice about my child. And, the amazing thing about this whole process is during this time, my son was diagnosed with Asperger's, which is high functioning autism. And for a moment when that first happened, I sort of felt like, oh, well, that's what's wrong. Like, that's why it's not working. So now I just have to learn how to parent a special needs child. And when I figure that out, I'll have it all figured out. And so I did the same thing, right? I went to those external places and it still didn't work. And so I remember the night, you guys, so vividly, I had spent dinner time in my room in a mommy timeout, just crying my eyes out because I didn't want to be around my own kid. And I just felt like I was failing. I felt like I was doing it all wrong and I hated myself. I would always say, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I figure this out? And I think that we have all had that feeling about something in our life. Like, what is a problem here? And that evening, after my son was asleep in his bed, I went into his room and I just laid down on his bed. And I got really still and quiet. And I was listening to him breathe. And I just wanted to be there with him in a place where I didn't feel frustrated. I just wanted to be with him. And in that moment, I heard my inner voice say to me, you have to be willing to love him just as he is. And you have to be willing to love yourself just as you are. And that is what it means to be worthy. And for me, that was really the starting point. That was where I realized that this is something bigger than just being a mom. This is about how we need to be living our lives, understanding that worthiness does not come from what we do or from what we don't do. It doesn't increase or diminish based on that, but it is always there. And that wisdom inside of us can remind us of that, and it can show us the true things that we need to do. It showed me how to parent my child because, the books didn't work, and, how my mom did it didn't work. All I needed to do was listen to my gut and go with that. And that's when I realized this is something that we all need to be connected to, that inner voice. So that was the beginning of my journey as a coach. And there have been many iterations of it throughout the years, but that was really the beginning point for me.
And I love that, Kelly, and it's so beautiful. And one other thing that I really like from studying with you and hearing you speak is you also are very family orientated. You are very much that yes, the woman can go out and have a career and be at the top of her class and do everything that quote unquote a man can do in society today, but she can also be that fantastic mom and be in the home and take care of kids, and the family unit can stay together. I admire that about your coaching, and you are very much about that it can be very balanced, the male and female, the family unit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think what's interesting about the way I approach that is that a lot of people might look at my life and shake their head, or judge it as not being right or not being the way they would do it. And I think that's what makes me most proud, because it's the way I need to be doing it. And I think when we start to honor that everyone has their own way of doing it, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to be this way or that way. It's really about our own desires and tapping into them and figuring out actually what we want. Not what we think we want, which is really different sometimes, as you know.
Yes. I found that out by sitting with you.
So, Kelly, I have a question in regards to when you received that message laying in bed with your son, listening to him breathe. So, from that point, once you got that message, how did your relationship with him transpire at that point? I mean, in that regard, how did that work out for you?
That's such an interesting question, because when I think of this story, I actually think the thing that changed the most was my relationship with myself. I mean, I actually feel like even though I said I didn't want to be with my child, I don't think he knew that. So it was really about how I was approaching my own love for myself. And, I think with any parent child relationship, you have ups and downs. But I think that really accepting him as who he was helped me accept me as how I am. And it's a reminder to me always that we're created exactly right. Like we're created exactly the way that we were supposed to be created, and that we have these amazing and unique to us gifts, and that is what's important. The other stuff is it's just not important.
That's a very good point, Kelly, because sometimes we get caught up in our own mind of how things should be, like you mentioned earlier, and sometimes it doesn't work that way. So once you change your perspective in that, we are exactly how we're supposed to be. That's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah. And, it's one I find challenging still, because I do believe that we evolve, and that it's okay to want to get better. And so it's sort of finding the balance point of that. Okay, like I love myself right now, and I can have healthy achieving in my life, and I can want more in my life, and that's okay. And so that's something that I'm still figuring out as a grown up and as a coach, is sort of like, how do we balance those things, and how do we make sure that the getting better is not about showing that we're good enough.
And that's where how Todd and I have developed this podcast, The Shadow Self, A Journey Within, because you have to go within. And a lot of times, those labels, those perceived notions that are put on us, come with those emotions of anger, jealousy, hatred, fear. And it's okay to feel those for a moment. It's okay to have a day of sadness. It's okay to feel unsure or have a moment of unworthiness, but to figure out the why and the core. and then move forward and be better. And that's what we call the shadow or the mask, and you can take it off and go within and find out where it came from and work with it, and then go to achieve, like you just said, achieve the next step, achieve better from it. And so I love how you worded that, Kelly. That was perfect. We can always be better.
I 100% agree with that perspective too. And I think what's really beautiful about that, about being able to take the mask off and being able to feel the emotions, is that those emotions, I think sometimes we think that's it. Like, oh, there's the anger, there's the fear, and then that's it. But really, what I hear you saying is that those emotions, and what I believe as well, are data, right?
Yes.
Like that's information. And like if we can get past how they feel and then be like, oh, well, what information is that fear telling me? What information is that anger telling me, or that critical self telling me? That's when we really start to step into our power as understanding who we are and what we're here to do.
Yes. You just floored me with that because that is true. Why just put it in a book for a business card? Just get your voice out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my next question for that for the listeners is, um, what positive words of advice would you tell somebody who is maybe a little leery of taking that next step, or looking at themselves in the mirror, or looking within?
Mm. That's a really great question. And I think because there's always that fear of like, who am I going to find there? You know, if your whole life you've been the overachiever, perfectionist, and all of a sudden you dig in and you realize that's not making you happy, then who are you without that? And that can be really, really scary. And so my advice always is just one step at a time, just one step at a time. One moment of stillness, one day of writing down in your journal what you love about yourself. Just those baby steps add up, and it gets easier and easier and easier as you do it. So don't think of it as like, oh my gosh, I have this enormous mountain to climb and I have to do it all in one day. No, it's just one foot in front of the other, step by step, with the intention of getting to the top. And like I said at the beginning, like the work is there and will be there for us our whole lives. And that's just part of living. And so when we approach it like that, like, oh, what freedom can I find in this? When I take the mask off, who can I be and how can I find comfort in that, instead of feeling always like frustrated and not satisfied and not who you are. That, we all know it, like that feeling of going to a party and kind of not really being authentic, and it just feels gross. It feels like, well, like this is not me, and we just want to leave, or we drink a lot to cover up the feeling, right? Like we all know that feeling. And when you are connected with your inner voice, you don't have to feel that way. So I think understanding what freedom you have in doing the work makes the work easier.
Yeah, that is so true, and I love the way that you say, because Todd and I both agree that it's never done. Like, there's if someone truly thinks that they are done and that they don't have to take any classes anymore, or they don't have to work anymore, then what are they truly hiding? Because every day is a process. The work is always there for the rest of our lives. It's always
Oh my gosh, yeah.
so. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I think you hit a core when you said that.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a personal example. So, I consider myself to be a recovering perfectionist. um, and I'm always in recovery because I bump up against that in new and different ways all the time. And it's, stuff that I feel like I've been working on for years and years and years. And then when it pops up, it still surprises me. Like, oh, really? Oh, hey there, you're back again. And just the other day, I was doing an interview for my podcast, In Her Voice, and I was interviewing a woman who is an expert on perfectionism and procrastination. And, like I said, I feel like I've got the perfectionism, pretty well under control, but I'm a huge procrastinator. And so I was really excited to have this conversation with her because I wanted to dig into like how they were linked, because she believes that they're linked. And she said, when you're procrastinating, you're convincing yourself that you're giving yourself space and time so you don't have to feel the stress of perfectionism, when really you're just delaying it to a smaller amount of time. And she's like, what you really need to understand is how you need to love yourself enough to give yourself the time that you need to do this, and to understand that it's okay if it takes you longer. It's okay if it doesn't go as planned, right? Because when we procrastinate, we just like smash everything into one, and then we blame it on like the procrastination if it's not perfect. And it's almost like this excuse for us to bump up against the perfectionism, but then deny it. And for me, that was like this huge aha moment of like, oh my gosh, I do that. I thought I was better than that. And then it goes right back to see just what I said, is that place of judgment. Like, oh, I thought I was better than that. Like, it's okay. It's okay that I'm not perfect. It's okay that I'm still a perfectionist, but I'm working on it. And I don't need to be good at it all the time. It's okay. And so it goes right back to that evolution of self-love and understanding of like loving ourselves now, right where we are now, understanding that we are worthy now, whether or not we feel it, it's there for us. And then we can continue. It's just another opportunity for us to work on it. So I just laugh now. Like, I just have to laugh when that stuff comes up, because I'm like, oh yeah, here it is again.
Hello. Welcome to the circle.
I haven't seen you in a while, but I knew you would come back to me. And it's just another level of understanding who I am, and of understanding what I need to give myself, what I need to ask for. That's a big one, right? Asking for that help, and then allowing it, giving myself permission to take that.
That's beautiful. Giving yourself permission to take that.
Mm-hmm.
Just giving yourself permission that it's okay. As you said earlier, Kelly, we're evolving. We're learning about ourselves as we go, and it's okay. It's very, very. Thank you for sharing that, because that kind of hit a couple points for me. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. I knew someone would benefit from it. That's the way it all is.
Yeah, Todd. Yeah, our techie guy, Todd. And then if the listeners wanted to get in touch with you, or have a session with you, how could they do that?
Well, the best way to get in touch with me is to go to my website, kellycovert.com. And if you are interested in coaching or would like to connect with me, you can message me right from there, or you can sign up for a discovery call, which is a great way to get a feel for what inner voice coaching is like. You talked about, we had our session together. So if people are interested in what that feels like, they can sign up for a free call with me. It's 20 minutes. And it's really, we just sit and do basically what I do during my coaching session for 20 minutes. So you get a feel to see if it would be a good fit, to see if it makes sense for you, to see if that's what you need right now. And of course, you can listen to my podcast, In Her Voice, wherever you listen to The Shadow Self. So on whatever podcast app, you can just search In Her Voice and it will pop up, and you can subscribe and listen. And I have almost 100 episodes, a lot of really, really great interviews. And then I also do a weekly solo show.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, Kelly, could you give the listeners an idea how your sessions work? Do you do Skype? Do you do in person? Do you both? I mean, can you explain a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, sure. So if if I'm working with clients that are local, I will do face-to-face sessions like the session that Joanne and I had. But if you are not local, we do Zoom, which is a video call, and it's really great. I can record it and then you can rewatch it again if you want. And I have clients all over the world. So it's really easy to use and can be set up anywhere. And I find that to be great. And, honestly, I've done phone sessions before, and sometimes that works good too, because I think sometimes we need to close ourselves off from that visual that can be so distracting. And that helps us go in and tap into that intuition that is there. So it's really easy to find what works for you wherever you are.
That's great. It's nice to have those different options.
Yeah. Technology is amazing and sometimes frustrating, but mostly amazing.
And you use the word intuition and guidance a lot. I've come in contact with people who say, well, I don't have that. But in hearing you and you sharing tonight, I would like you to reiterate for the listeners that everybody does have that if they just take the time to listen to that inner voice.
Oh, yeah. I 100% believe that it is available to all of us. This is not, psychic powers or channeling. It's none of that. This is our deep internal wisdom. And personally, I do believe that it comes from God. And I think that is sort of up to everyone to figure out what their belief system is when it comes to that. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. And I think the challenge when we speak of inner voice is that oftentimes people say, oh, yeah, well, I have an inner voice and she's a real bitch. She's not nice to me. And that voice is not what I'm talking about. And that's what I call our inner mean girl voice, our inner critic, right? And we all have that too. And sometimes that voice is so loud and so obnoxious and so present all of the time. It's really hard to hear our inner voice. And so a lot of the work that I do with my clients is just helping them get still enough and get quiet enough so they can hear it. That's really hard. It's hard to settle down. It's hard to let go of all of the things and all of the busyness. And sometimes that can be our greatest challenge. So sometimes in our sessions, it's just really about me holding that space for you to have that moment of no distraction, of quiet listening, of stillness, to be with who you are and to hear that voice. And the beautiful thing is, the more you practice that, the better you get at it. And so you have to find it to begin with, and it's there. I really 100% believe that it's there for all of us.
I agree.
Thank you, Kelly. And I challenge all you listeners out there tonight to sit a minute after this call and try to find that stillness and that voice.
And send us a message if how that works for you. We would be very interested to hear how that works for you guys.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great challenge, Joanne. You guys go do it. She's smart. You should listen to her.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. We're going to have to wrap things up. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are very honored that you chose to spend some time with us. It's been a very interesting conversation, so thank you.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure, you guys.
Thank you, Kelly.
Until next time, everybody have a good time. Good night.
Good night.